Okay, welcome back. We're beginning part 2 of our skill review for 6.2, and we're starting with step 9. So we just finished getting our total number of blue shoes in inventory, and so we had to use a SUMIFs function. And so now we want to know the average, the median selling price, and the most common of those values. So what we've got here is we're going to have to use the same sort of logic that we did for the sum, except now we're going to do average ifs function, and we're going to use the same sort of criteria and range that we want. So we want to use the values in the selling price column as the average range argument. Use the values in the item description column as the criteria range 1, and use star shoes to find all those items that end in the word shoes. Use the values in the color column as the criteria 2, and use the criteria blue. So where do we want this function to go? We want it to go in cell B4. So there's the average selling price of blue shoes. So we're going to do, again, under the functions library, more functions, we're going to go to statistical this time, and we see the average IFS there. That'll bring up our dialog. What is it that we want to get the average of? Average selling price for blue shoes. So we want the selling price column So we're going to select G3 to G25. That's part C. And then we want this criteria range. We're going to use inventory again. We want to look in this column for the word that ends in shoes. So everything including, up into including, and then shoes. Remember, we don't have to include a space because a space is just like any other character, and that's part of the asterisk that's covering that. Okay, so when I look over here, looks like we got through F, got through G. Then we're going to do, what's our next criteria? We're looking for blue. It has to match blue as well. And we can find out if it's blue or not by looking in this range. And we'll need to type in blue here. And so our formula should look like this. This is what we want to sum. We want to find all matches and sum values that match here if it's a shoe and it's blue. So we've chosen the correct columns that we're looking for that. If that row matches blue and shoe, then we pull the inventory price here and we add it to the next row that matches blue and shoe or shoe and blue. Alright, once we hit enter, puts a value in there if we did something right. So it looks like I've done something wrong, which is always not a good thing, but for us it's a good thing, so you can see where I've messed up and you might have messed up, and we'll see if we can correct that. So just looking at my formula, I'm guessing it's because I didn't use a big enough array here or a range. So if I change that to 25, we get an average selling price for blue shoes. All right, so now we want to know the number of blue shoes in inventory. In order to do that, we're going to use a count ifs function. Remember, there's count if and count ifs with an S on the end. So, and same thing with average if and average ifs. So average if just means you're having one criteria. If you use the S on the end in that function, it means you have multiple criteria that you're looking at or want to use. And they work a little bit differently, so make sure you practice that, because when we come to the test, you may not have access to your notes again or understand how that actually works. All right, step 10. We're going to do count ifs function to find the number of blue shoes in inventory. Use the values in the item description column as a criteria range argument, and use star shoes again to find all the items that end in the word shoes. Use the values in the color column as the criteria range 2 argument, and use the criteria blue. So we want to count what value. So where we're going to put this, we're going to put this in B5. We're going to do more functions again, and this time we're going to go to statistical, and we're looking for not count or count A or count blank, but count ifs, right? Counts the number of cells specified by a given set of conditions or criteria. All right, so we've done that. So criteria range 1, we're going to click on that. Go to inventory. We know it has to be shoes. Click here to return to the dialog box. And the criteria should be same as before. We're looking for something that ends in shoes. The second criteria has to be that in this range where we're looking, it has to be blue. Okay. So just to make sure, as we look at these steps over here, we've got that A3 to A25, star shoes, C3 to C25, got that, and the criteria is blue. And we're ready to click OK. So number of blue shoes in inventory. I think that's right. Let's double check for a second. So when I go back to my inventory data, I see I've got all the shoes are right here. This one's red. This one's blue. There's only one. This one's red. This one's white. This one's gray. So there is only one blue. That's the selling price. That's also the average selling price. So that's good. I'll buy that. And because that was blue, the only blue, there's only 15 in inventory, so it only had to sum 1. So it's always a good idea to check your work. All right, so we're going on to the next step. And step 11 says now use database functions to analyze inventory data. This method gives you more flexibility in your analysis. Once you set up the formula, you can change the criteria in the worksheet without changing the formula. That is the basic advantage. The inventory DB name range has been created for you to use as the database argument. It references A2 to H25 in the inventory sheet. Notice that this named range includes the label row. Okay. So A2 That's the label row, which I call the field names or header names. So when you're dealing with databases and also in spreadsheets, you need a column name or field name at the top. That's how everything gets linked together. And so you got to make sure the name is spelled correctly here and in your functions as arguments when you're looking for something. So if we go back to step 11, the next part says use the daverage function or database function to calculate the average selling price for items with the word football in the item description. Use the wildcard character asterisk before and after the word football to find all item descriptions with football anywhere in the text. Use the column label selling price as the field argument. Remember to enclose the column label in quotation marks. Set up the criteria range. So, where are we going to do this? In cell D8, D8, now, let me just double check and make sure we're in the right spreadsheet. Okay, I think we are in the right spreadsheet, so we'll go to D8 again. And here we're just setting up our criteria range. And the criteria range has to include the field name and at least one row below it. So here in our field name, we're going to type in item description. Now, sometimes I misspell a lot, so typically what I would do is if I know this is my field name, I would click on that, do a Control C, come back over here, do a Control V, and I get the exact field name that's in my database. Because if I misspell it, it's not going to work. All right. So underneath this criteria, under this field name, what am I looking for in the database for item description? Well, I'm looking for anything. That's the first asterisk. And then the spelling football and anything afterwards. So that becomes the criteria there for one part of my function. In cell B9, this is where we'll enter the formula. So on the Formulas tab, in the Functions library, we'll click the Insert Functions button. And it brings up this list for you. We're going to select for the category database. So here are all the database functions. We want daverage. So we're going to double click that. So the database, we're going to use a range. The range needs to include the field names. And we've already got a range that does that, and it's called inventory DB. The field is going to be the field that we want to get the average out of. So that again needs to be spelled exactly how the field name is in your database. Selling price. And the criteria now is going to be D8 to D9. So the field name and then something else underneath it. Now you could have and or conditions with your criteria, and it would show you that. So we'll click OK. So it says that's the average price for football items. Now, if we went back over here and let's say we wanted to, what's the average price for youth items? The nice thing about the database functions is they give you a little bit more functionality. So here, let's say I was just looking for the word youth. Once I change that, notice the value over here changed. So it changes back to football so I don't get it wrong. And I'm going to make sure that's capitalized. I don't think it counted off, but you never know. The other thing I wanted you to know is that you could have a criterion range that included all the field names in your database. And as long as you had values here as part of your criteria, this would all be considered an AND operation. So it needs to match football and something else and something else and something else. Now, if I had a field name here, let's say I wanted to do this, and I had youth, and I put star youth. If here I said my criteria was not D8 but to E10, so it's that area, what I'm asking for is item description. I'm getting the average inventory of football or youth. So we'll take them both into account and give me the average. So now that's 3842. So we'll change this back to D9. And I'm going to get rid of this. But I wanted you to see how an OR operation is and how the D functions might work with an OR operation. If I had put the value youth here, that would have been an AND operation. If you ever select a criteria range that has a blank row underneath it, accidentally do that, that's going to select everything out of your database. So that's everything. So you want to be careful not to use a blank row in your criteria. So field names, criteria, you can have multiple ones. It doesn't have to be the same one. It could be any of these field names up here that you're looking for. All right. So got off on that little tangent. Got lines here. How do I get rid of the lines? What I typically do is I'll hit that format painter and just paint that as the same as the previous cell that I wanted. So now we should be back to normal. We're on the Formulas tab. Okay, and we'll pause there. And when we come back, we'll start another part to this skill review.